Okay, so here we are at 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening UK time, and that means this is it. How you doing, Inessa?
I'm doing very well. How are you this week?
Yeah, things were quite tough for me this week, um, but you get through the event, you get through it. You got to realize that emotions can sometimes be a bit of a roller coaster, and you got to know how to learn those skills. Oh, just a second. Just a second.
There you
Wow.
go.
What a right. Fantastic. Fantastic. Good evening to you, Mitchell.
Good evening. How are you?
Fantastic. Okay, we're going to get back to it in a second. Avril's on tonight saying hi, Dov, Inessa, and Mitchell's just arrived. So we're going to be back here in about, I would say, 30 seconds time. Let's go for it. So here we are. Look what I've got.
Only me without any Christmas.
This is my special bunch of flowers that I'm giving to you, Inessa.
Thank you so much. I accept it with pleasure.
I'm just going to put them down just now because it's going to
Beautiful.
go on my whole face. But yeah, I was just telling Inessa Mitchell, she asked me how I was, and I was just saying, it's been a bit of a tough week for me emotionally.
Okay.
But we're at, this is it now. So it's the end of the week, basically. We're, getting close to the weekend. And, I'm back up again. So you got to know how to surf those emotions, I think. It's a skill to be learned. And I don't think everybody can teach us them.
It's true. Yeah, because sometimes people seek their help everywhere, and sometimes they get wrong help, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, go on,
Sorry,
Mitchell.
I was just going to say, because a lot of, if you go on social media, there's a lot of people offering help. I just don't know in what context that is as well, in regards to what skill sets they actually have. That's all.
Yeah. So I've been getting kind of annoyed a little bit from social media. First time. But maybe it was because emotionally this week I was kind of feeling quite raw in certain times. But I just see social media filled with advice givers, filled with people coming up with all sorts of solutions, whether they're coaching solutions. There's so many multi-millionaires on social media. I've got a 6-figure number, I've got a 7-figure number. Oh, I'm making 8 figures, that kind of stuff, showing you the Ferraris in the background and all this business. And they're just very philanthropic. So they're giving us over this information because they feel that, they should give it away now. So they've wrote a book and they're giving it away for free, but they can't afford to give away the 7 quid or the 15 quid for the postage. Do you know what I mean? So things sometimes don't add up. On the other hand, you're getting a whole bunch of, a lot of cuckoos on giving, and you might have 500, 700,000 viewers, and they're bringing on people and, throwing out the tarot cards and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it makes me wonder if there's any damage being done or not.
No, agreed. I guess as well, because we don't know unless someone puts their actual credentials up there. I mean, someone could do a 2-day course and say they're qualified to do something when we all know here especially the experience we've all had as ourselves and the work we do, that's not the case. And actually, you could cause a lot of damage to someone, a lot of damage.
Yeah, I mean, the first law, sorry, Iness, I'll get back, but the first law that we all learn, and it's been around since ancient Greeks, is do no harm, right? That's the first law of therapy, the first law of medicine. Inessa?
Yes, I think this as well, because I saw I heard a lot of stories when the people literally desperately need help in many ways, in the health or some relationships, and they don't know where to go. They think maybe I should go to the psychologist, or maybe I'd go there. They just don't know what to do. And sometimes people with different belief system, they just believe they start from life coaching, which is lead to the energy healers and all this way. So as far as I know, even the people who has certification in the energy healing, who believes, yes, some people going to the church, some people going to the mosque, some people going to they stay at home and they can pray and they can receive what they need to receive. Some people use different kind of tools, as we said. But even in people there, like let's say like people at the church, people at the mosque, or people even there who work spiritually with people, they even there has to know about the risk. So person can, or psychologist as well. I mean, I'm talking about any different way help. So sometimes people, they just read little bit information on internet and they call themselves already psychologist, life coaching, Reiki healer, or etc., etc., etc. But they don't know risk. They think it's the fun. They think they're helping people. They can start help people. Maybe the person never heard about this. Maybe it could be some changes, but they don't know how much they could damage person. What is the result could be after? I think it's really dangerous. So yeah. So and the people, I think some people, they start to do all this stuff because of the ego. Every person, they can call themselves psychologists without any certification. They can call life coaching without any proper assessment to be a life coach. Or yeah.
What kind of damage do you think? Let's say you've got a kind of cowboy therapist, cowboy psychologist, cowboy kind of coach, or even a cowboy spiritual leader, right? Let's face it, we're talking about all types of healers out there. What kind of damage do you think can be done?
For example, I can say, for example, the people who believes in the spirituality, let's say people who believes in the chakras and all this stuff, right? Because maybe someone can listen to me now and say like she's talking some nonsense. I have my system beliefs. But I'm just talking about just one particular small things. It's just like piece of all the subject what we want to talk about. So for example, the people works with chakras, they don't know how to ground person. So you come into the person call themselves, I'm the healer. So they start to like activate your chakras and through the energy. And it's not the healer, is the universe healing the person. Person just kind of like transfer this energy. So if they, for example, open the chakra, which is responsible for the third eye, and the person can manage, the person gonna go crazy. And some people think it's a fun, but it's not fun. If the person open to this, if the person close to this, whatever you're gonna do, whatever even you're gonna pray on the person, nothing gonna happen. But when the person open to this, person can go mad because they don't know how to control it, they don't know how to deal it. The same I think is the psychologist as well. Person can go to some person who call themselves psychologist or even simple NLP practitioner, and they just don't know how to explain person properly, how to do this risk assessment. So person really, I think it can cause the serious mental illnesses. So instead to help, they maybe can help a little bit, but they can damage more. And plus the person gonna just giving money to that person to just for more help, more help, more help.
So you're kind of saying some financial damage?
I was thinking, yeah.
Yeah, and on the other hand, there could be actual mental health damage. Mitchell.
Yeah,
I was going to say, because, if someone's in desperate need of help and they've really struggled with whatever internal turmoil or whatever just going on, whatever it is that's going on in their life. And they believe that someone can help them. So they go to this person and maybe that person charges them. Now, if that person doesn't have the appropriate skill set, let's say, for instance, you're talking about trauma. So let's say you start opening up this, let's just say can of worms. And then suddenly you just close down, you leave the person. That person's then left with all of these feelings. If they're not sure how to process them, if they might suddenly think this is how I'm going to feel forever. If, say, for instance, someone can't manage their feelings, and let's say they like to drink, they might drink more. Or some people they might use medication, they might take more medication, or they just might get so distressed they harm themselves. I mean, I'm just, maybe that's extreme, but that's what can happen. Because if you don't know what you're doing and you're opening someone up and you're discussing, let's say, certain traumatic things that have happened to them, you could just trigger all this stuff, flashbacks, all kinds of things.
So Kath Russell is saying, do we believe there are people who are actually saying they are qualified when they aren't? And she said she hasn't come across anyone personally. Thanks for that, Kath. So is that what we're saying, or are we saying something else?
Well, I think that unless someone has credentials, if you have credentials, then of course you would probably have them on your website, or if you're seeing someone, you would say what you're qualified in. And if someone was, you would have them there. If you go
but Inessa said, for instance, that maybe they've done a quick online 3-week course, and so they have on their website that they are now, I don't know, a CBT therapist or any kind of therapist, or even that they've done, a year course in Reiki, and now you can come in, but they're in Australia and you're in England, and as long as you tune in at a certain time of the day, they're going to, it'll cost you a certain amount of money, but they will now treat you from afar. So they will have credentials. So
but I guess
yeah.
Well, I was going to say as well, I guess it's more about transparency. We can all say I've done some I could say I've done some CBT training. Yes, I have, but I haven't done years of CBT training, and I would never claim to put that forward to anyone, because that's just not correct. And if you're stating that you are a DBT or a CBT or a psychologist or whatever, then at least be transparent about, yes, I've done this adequate amount of training that states that I am qualified to do this kind of work with you. A 2-day course isn't, there's lots of 2-day courses. There's a week course. But, I guess really it's more about, there's no governing body in that sense. And I guess that's the area that needs to be sort of addressed is, it's so easy now for people to start up a business online. And the fact that everything's being done by Zoom, that you could sit there and just say, yes, I'm a qualified, and you could just but there's no governing body. So maybe it's about registration, people having to be registered if they're actively going to say they're a business online.
Yeah, but also,
yeah, go on, Inessa.
Also, I think because now lots of people on Instagram as well, they set up businesses all over the world, and they call themselves wherever just different names, and so I'm saying sometimes we have to check as well certification, but also I think to check the school where they study and their own experience. Because, for example, as I know, I just know little knowledge. For example, if you do this CBD, right, it's called this hours.
CBT.
With you, and you said to me how many hours I did, and so when the person gonna go and they check Inessa done just only 3 hours, and she doesn't have any practice, and it's only like this. So what's your practice? Who can prove it? Who can give evidence you have practice? So when the person says, just give you references, they say, okay, well, I'm going to go with her. Or she just new in this, I know this, so I'm going to think I'm going to pay her, or maybe I'm not going to pay her, or maybe I'm just going to help you to get experience, but I know she's the new, because lots of people lie. And so I think it's this, but there's some certification which came from nowhere, or some people just believe in the words because someone know how to sell their own business. People should be more vigilant where they're going, to who they're going, and who they allow to come in their head to believe.
Okay, so that's an interesting point, Nessa. Just that Kath has come back and said, is the problem here that our profession, particularly mine, she's in counselling, isn't regulated? So I just want to bring up that point that Kath brought up and your point, Inessa, because you kind of brought in something else. A question of whose responsibility is it? Is it my responsibility as a client kind of to say, well, I need to check who I'm letting into my head, to quote Inessa, or is it a problem, as Kath brought up, that maybe it's the counsellors or the professionals who should be regulated? Where does the responsibility lie, do you think? Mitch?
I was going to say, if people are online, it's very difficult to regulate who comes online. If you've got an account, you just open a new account. I guess it's more about, if, for instance, let's say Facebook or Instagram, when people register, then maybe if it's going to be for therapeutic work or whatever they've decided to call themselves, then maybe that's the part where the intervention needs to come in to assess whether this person has the adequate qualifications to be doing what they're doing. I don't know. That's just...
Yeah, but I mean, like, as you said, right, we're, getting into people's homes and houses these days, there's a very low barrier because, we're on it now. People are watching us. We're not doing any therapy. We don't give advice. I know in my own practice, the last thing I do is give anybody any advice. But what about people who say that they're not qualified, right? They're not, qualified from the point of view of done a course, but they just say, well, I've recovered from depression, and so I'm going to tell you how you can recover from depression just because I've had that experience. What about that?
So I guess, depending, if someone's charging you money, if someone was given, I guess, for instance, if someone, let's say, for instance, for argument's sake, someone had depression and they were able to manage themselves in a way that they were able to alleviate their depression, they might have done certain things that might be of use to someone. So if they pass that information on and say, well, this is what I did, again, everyone is individual, everyone is unique. What works for one person might not work for another person. We're all individuals. So again, it's about experimentation for ourselves. But if someone's asking to be paid to give that information, I guess really it's quite difficult, because if that information for someone is valuable, then people are going to pay if they think it's going to help.
Yeah. So we're kind of getting down now, whether it's a therapist, because we're kind of centered on therapists, even though there are a lot of fake healers or healers out there that are, and healers we're kind of using in a very broad sense, right? So a healer could even be a coach or anything like that. But what I'm trying to kind of use this discussion for is to say, well, what is the difference between a professional and a non-professional, apart from the fact that one might be taking money and one might not be? But let's say both are taking money. So it's not a money issue, right? So what is the difference between a trained professional person and somebody who just thinks that they're in good intentions? Maybe they're not charlatans, okay? So we're not talking about crystal ball charlatans, but we're saying that there's two people. Both have good intentions, but one is trained and one is not. What do you think the difference is? Where's the main difference?
Is there risk, and is risk
Well, I was going to say about, obviously there's guidelines, professional guidelines that you follow, that you have to follow. And also, depending on what course you've studied, the reason you're studying a course is it's proven, it's been used, it's been implemented, it's gone through either the healthcare profession or the governing bodies to actually state that this process works, because they've studied, they've done data, they've done feedback. There's been loads of things that are incorporated into this before it's actually stated, actually, we can use this. It is viable. It's going to work. There's loads of governing bodies protecting, and therapists, you know, as well. Psychologists, they have. If you're a psychologist, or even in the work I do, we have regular counselling. We have, you know, we have to feed back because, again, there's transference, countertransfer. There's so many different factors. If you're not adequately trained to know that, then you could be bringing your own stuff into a conversation with one of your clients and not even realize it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Kath says, first of all, that she says that she is loving this discussion. So that's a good thing. Thanks, Kath. And she says she believes the difference is down to the knowledge of the damage we might cause. So yeah, that gets back to what we're mentioning about do no harm, right? And she says that training is underpinned by theory and ethical responsibility, supervision, etc. Absolutely, that's getting to what you were saying, Mitch. Avril's coming in saying the therapist should be totally upfront about their experience and qualifications. Absolutely. I want to get back to what you were talking about, Mitch, which is you kind of touched there on basically evidence-based methodology, right? So we're not talking. You said that if we're using evidence-based stuff, we know it works because it's been tested, it's been trialed out. You know, there's a lot of talk these days. We're getting familiar with the idea of trials and things like that through the idea of the vaccine. And a lot of people are getting very, I don't want to get into the vaccine conversation, but just using it as an example of, would you take a vaccine if it hadn't gone through any trials whatsoever, right? Just somebody comes up and says, here, I've got something in this syringe, I'm going to stick it in your arm. Probably not, right? And even we're a little bit kind of wary when the evidence is only less than a year old. We're still a bit wary about it. But if you're talking about therapies that maybe are, you know, got a good 10 years behind it, 20 years behind it, 30 years behind it, we've got our evidence, you can actually look at the papers, it's been peer reviewed so many times. It does give, I think, the therapist, first of all, confidence that what they're doing is not causing any harm. And certainly the client. I'm a little bit wary, though, on the opposite extreme, which is too much regulation. What would you say about that?
Well, I guess if there's too much regulation, then we're stuck with the same thing. There's no expanse on trying different things, new things. For example, if you think about something like, let's say CBT, and then was it in the 70s, Marshall Ernham came out with the DBT, which was part mindfulness, part CBT, and they trialed it with people that were self-harming. And what they found was that people self-harmed less. Therapists were able to work in a more healthier way because they were getting burnt out as well. And so it was proven that worked. So I guess if things had been too regimented, maybe that wouldn't have come forward.
Yeah, but I think all this trial, they should give the time to try for free. Not like, the person invents something new and start to straight away charge money and trying on the person, like guinea pigs, right? It just should be get like years or 2 years, whatever the period of the time when they're not charging people. They're observing how people gonna react. Maybe someone gonna have like bad side effects, and then if it's the proven, then they should probably move forward and be chargeable. Like if they do the private one.
And I guess I was going to say, I guess that's where things like with regards to the NHS, where people aren't, they're not charged, and they're using like stable methods that have been used or stable treatments that have been used over a prolonged period of time with a cohort of patients that are specific to what their needs are. So I guess, in that sense, it's, you've got that kind of, it's, you're not being charged. And then because of, I guess, the strain within certain services, then people will tend to go private because they're on a waiting list. They need to be assisted urgently.
And there's the issue of, I think, power and elitism in regulatory organizations, whether they're voluntary or not. and a lot, getting back to what Kath was mentioning earlier about, regulation of counselling. Well, there is definitely a plus in regulating, but when you look into it, who's regulating the regulators? What are they actually regulating? That you've ticked a few boxes, so you've got pieces of paper. They're not really regulating if you're a good therapist or not. Okay, so you've got pieces of paper that says that you've studied X, Y, and Z, and that's fair enough. But still, you might be a therapist that's, not really, following any of what you're following. Nobody's testing you as a therapist. They're only testing you as in what qualifications you've got. And maybe it becomes also a situation where you want to do DBT, CBT, or whatever else that you've picked up on. And these organizations might be charging you a lot of money to learn it. You might have to go through different loopholes and hoops.
It is expensive.
Right?
It's
And
very
they're taking
expensive.
a lot of money out of you, and making sure you qualify with so many CPDs, as Inessa was talking about, per year. And then you think, well, is that what it's all about? Is it just about, these kind of things? Or is there a little bit more to therapy than just all these techniques and skills? I mean, there's a thing called the dodo effect. You ever heard of the dodo effect?
No, I haven't.
So the dodo effect says that 80%, throwing out numbers, but 80% of good therapy is not the methodology, which is the 20%, but it's the therapeutic relationship. That is where the real work gets done. And I think that is what we learn when we're trained, is the therapeutic relationship. We're not just talking in a pub with a pal and, helping him out because he doesn't feel well. I think when you go through training, you're learning how to connect in that safe way with somebody. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
That's a skill on its own, though. Building rapport with someone, trust. That takes
and being
time.
able to hold their pain.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
definitely.
and also to find out the individual, method how to treat person as well, because what's work for one person, as Mitchell said, doesn't work for another person. But some of the psychology, just like I wrote on some Facebook, and the person was just given this advice, and someone said it just doesn't work for me. So that kind of psychologist or whatever, I'm not sure if it's real psychologist or not, they start to shut on another person, not shut, just be not really nice, broke their rapport and saying, this is not about my method, this is just about you, because you probably don't do what I'm telling to you to do. But just my opinion, that probably the person is not working for her. It could be work something else for the person. So I think that people should pay attention as well. I understand some people desperately need help and they can't clearly think, especially when they're depressed or anxious or ill, but sometimes they have to stop, breathe and think, is a really person helping me?
I want to do what you said, because we're kind of concentrating on protecting the client here, but the damage can also be done to the therapist if they don't know what they're doing, right? When I was training, for instance, and it was an amazing insight for me that in my early days of training, and I was being supervised by a psychodynamic, I'm not a psychodynamic therapist, and I thought it was all whoopee and hippy-dippy back then, and I was kind of, I'm a behavioralist and I don't believe in that stuff. But my supervisor was a psychodynamic, and so what can I do? But she said to me, and this stuck with me ever since, that the therapist's instrument, every profession has an instrument, right? Mm-hmm. So a surgeon will have all the tools of surgery, the knives and and clips and all this kind of stuff. A mechanic will have his spanners and all this kind of. Every a musician has the musical instrument and so on. And she said to me, "What do you know? What the instrument that you use?" Now, usually we will probably say, "Well, I use my talk, right? I'm a talk therapist, so I'm using my instrument is my voice. And she said, no, your instrument is your psyche, your soul, your inner self is what is being used when you're connecting with another human being. And that is very fragile. So when somebody gets burnt out, for instance, they're not getting burnt out because they've spoken too much. They're not getting jaw, pain. They're getting burnt out in their inner selves because they're exhausted. And that is what is being used as that connection instrument. And I thought, wow, that really has stuck with me ever since. And that can be damaged if it's not looked after properly.
And I would think, obviously, if you're seeing a considerable amount of people daily, weekly, that's a lot of energy being transferred from different people's struggles and challenges coming your direction.
Yeah.
So from that aspect, let me ask, from taking that part, what do you think, Dove, could be done to safeguard that then? If we're looking at, people in general in the profession, I mean, supervision, we know all about that. But let's say, for instance, as you just said, if someone hasn't had the adequate training and hasn't got a forum where they can sit talking to other professionals around difficult situations or getting feedback, advice, which we can get through speaking to our colleagues, if they haven't got that, if they're not in that environment, then who do they go to? A friend who has no skill set? I'm just curious.
So my opinion is that there's two things. If you're talking about a trained person or a non-trained person, but they're still doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah.
So a non-trained person doesn't have any go-to at all because they probably didn't even realize that they could be causing damage to themselves. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't do it, right? And the damage, I think, can be, and we're talking about the giver here, we're talking about the healer, not the client. If we don't realize that the healer themselves can be damaged quite a lot, if they don't realize that, then if you're not trained, then you probably didn't even you were never ever told that. And so you're walking on a very thin line, and you might be doing long-term damage and not know it. If you're trained, then apart from the supervision and the group supervision and all that's important to go to, I think a real big responsibility is on the healer to do self-care.
Yeah.
And self-care is something that is generally, and I'm speaking very generally here, generally neglected by the healer himself, by the therapist themselves, but also by the organizations that they work for, if they work for an organization. The biggest organization I can kind of come up with at the moment is like the silly National Health Service. And I am a big, big, big fan of the National Health Service. I think it's the wonderful organization that was, in the 40s or whatever, just after the Second World War. And I think it's something that defines who we are as on this island that we live on. I think it's totally mismanaged, and I think that the people that work for it are closest to slavery as you could possibly get legally. I think they're taken advantage of because people that work in the NHS, and I used to work in the NHS when I was a younger boy, come out of college and school. The people that want to help. People that work in the National Health Service are people that want to help, they want to give. And when your employer takes that and takes it and doesn't really look after you, the chances are that you're going to get some sort of compassionate fatigue or burnout or whatever. And I reckon there has been studies done, but I reckon if you go now to probably anywhere in the NHS, you'll find a large proportion of people are, I'm talking about the therapists, the givers, the helpers, the workers are suffering compassion fatigue and burnout.
I would agree with that. I think again, as you said, I think people that are in that profession, or in this profession, neglect themselves a lot. Think that they can just continue. Don't even think about it until suddenly something happens, and then
And I think
suddenly
it's their
without,
responsibility. It's not
yeah,
just the responsibility of the employer.
no,
Yeah.
it's our yours, mine. It's our responsibility. If we're not looking after ourselves, that's down to us. And
Yeah.
what makes us feel, or what makes us think that we also can't get unwell? I mean, I think that everyone has, that there's a thin line which we walk, and you can go either side, be in treatment or out of treatment.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a so from a death in the family to a marriage breakup to a loss of a job to anything can trigger someone, and it might not be something that people expect either, because over the years of maybe not taking care of yourself, things accumulate, and it's just that one small thing that happens that just tips you. So you just got to really, that's something that's really important. I think it's something, the fact that you brought it up is, I think a lot of people just don't realize that. It's about looking after ourselves.
So let's sum up for this. Is it this week, Inessa? How would you sum up? What do you want to give across tonight to our viewers?
I just have like little kind of not advice. I mean, I just want to say just little things, which is I want to say people who, wherever you go, psychologist, energy healer, Reiki, wherever you go, even you just go to have some just simple consultation. When you go there, just check the person, who they are, what they're doing. Don't try to ask certification or qualification. Also, the check experience as well. And even you go to this person, or also just share it with someone close to you. Share it to your like partners, family, best friend, your experience with that person, so that person can see more clearly. Probably from outside they can give you advice to continue or not to continue, to just go in and wasting not just your money, just your mental health, and just be protected. So I think just be careful where you going, with who you going, and just don't open up very straight away, like who you trust. And yeah, this just don't let anyone to come into your head straight away without knowing person very well. Because sometimes the people not, they are who they are telling about.
Yeah, really important. Mitchell?
Just one thing, really. Just do your research. Do your research. Look at governing bodies. Look at, just do your research. And yeah, that's it, really. Just really do your research. Speak to friends, family, other people that might have had experience with someone, a qualified person, and get the feedback from them. Were they good? A lot of the time it's word of mouth as well. If someone's had a good experience and they pass that on to you, then if you trust that person, if it's a close friend or family member, you're going to trust what they say. So yeah, okay, I'll go in that direction. And if you don't have any knowledge, just go online. There's governing bodies. Just do your research.
Yeah, both of you, I agree. Regarding the client side, I agree with both of you. Basically, I'm going to put down to buyer beware, just like anything else. Before you hand over your money, know who you're handing it over to and what you're getting in return. I think it's the responsibility of clients this time to do what you said, Mitchell, to recommend, to word of mouth. If you've had a good experience, then take away that stigma of, oh, I've been in therapy, and shout it out and say, well, I know a good therapist. So that's probably one of the better recommendations that you can get. On the other hand, for the side of the healer, the therapist, I'm taking away tonight basically of look after your instrument, right? So, a musician would tune up, make sure the instrument's sounding good. Surgeon's not going to go in there with blunt instruments. You're going to make sure they're sharpened up, make sure they're the best that they can possibly be. And so I think we as healers need to make sure that we know the latest research, we know the latest information, that we look after ourselves and keep that instrument of ours, our soul, our psyche, our emotions, whatever it is, as skilled up as possible and looked after. You know, not doing 12 clients a day or 10 clients a day or any of that kind of stuff if we can help it, because that's going to really wear us down. And to demand of our organizations that we all work for, whoever it is, to look after its employees, if we're ever in a position of influence, to look after our helping employees. And that goes for policemen and firemen and ambulance drivers and, you know, everybody. You don't always have to be a woo-woo kind of healer. You know, somebody that's supplying services to other people. We need to really look after ourselves. That's it. This is it. It's 17th of December, and
Dove, I was going to ask. Next Thursday's Christmas Eve. What's the plan?
Tell me. You tell me. What do we want? What do we want to do?
Inessa. What are you thinking, Inessa?
What are you thinking?
Don't mind. You ask questions.
Are you going to be out on the razzle? Oh no, you can't. Are you going to be at home, relaxing?
Yeah, we look down at home actually.
Yeah, all tier 3 here, so
exactly.
Not a lot going on, and I don't have bubbles.
But listen, maybe we can get some and blow some bubbles.
Maybe we can be a bubble, a virtual bubble.
A virtual bubble, yes. Well, I'll be celebrating.
Well, you're already started. Okay, so we will decide through the week if we're on next week or not. Avril's thanking us. Thank you, Avril. And
thank you, Avril.
Thank you.
And Catherine agreed with what, you know, she agreed. She had a situation that she can't disclose, but due to being present on social media, she was put in an unsafe position. And that is really important. That's what we discussed. Thank you, everybody that took part, and those viewers, and for the hearts and the likes and everything. Share it out. We want to get these messages that we come with every week to more and more people. So the more viewers we get, the better that we can reach out to other people. For this week, this is it.
This is it. And if we don't speak to you, have an amazing Christmas. Do the best you can.
Amazing Christmas to everybody. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, take care.
Merry Christmas.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.